Hello, I'm Terry Jones. For the next half hour here on BBC Radio 4, I invite you to join me in a bit of eavesdropping, which I suppose is what radio is all about. We're going to be listening in on a rather special conversation. It's between one of the world's greatest storytellers and a woman who inspired him to become just that. When I first read Philip Pullman's amazing trilogy, His Dark Materials, I was staggered by his imagination and the power of his storytelling. It is, for me, one of the great imaginative works in the English language, and for what it's worth, it's soon to be turned into a cinematic blockbuster. So this is a rare chance to get inside the head of a great writer and try and trace the impossible, his sources of inspiration. It was here in Harlech in the late 1950s that he encountered someone who was to have a profound effect on his creative life. A teacher at the local secondary school, Miss Enid Jones. And today, on this cold morning, with the town of Harlech shrouded in a sea mist, Philip has returned to revisit the wellspring of his inspiration. So come with me as we walk in the shadow of Harlech Castle, perched high on its hill, and sidestep into a labyrinth of grey stone walls and cobbled streets to a place where Philip spent his teenage years and where his introduction to Wales began with a bang.
My very first day at Ysgol Dydwy, I'd just come from London, and somebody must have heard me speaking or asked me where I came from or something. I said London. Smack, and I was into a fight on my first.
Oh, yes, you had a fight.
In fact, everybody I had a fight with became a good friend afterwards. That soon taught me that if I wanted to avoid fights in the playground, I'd have to imitate a Welsh accent. But here I was in this school in North Wales with a lot of Welsh-speaking children, and I liked reading books, I liked doing the grammar exercises, and this was always been my favourite subject. And it didn't actually teach my classes for the first couple of years. But when we moved up to the third form, because this is the days before it was year 7, year 8, year 9 and so on as it is now, we had grown-up English then, yes. And Miss Jones was in charge of the class.
I can see you now in the back, in the corner of the room. I mean, there wasn't much of a back, was there?
No, it was a little tiny room.
Tiny room, yes.
On the top floor of the school. It had a view of the Morfa and of the mountains beyond it. It was a happy sort of room. All the experiences I had in there were good ones. And we stimulated each other. There was a lot of discussion. You were happy with discussion, weren't you?
Yes, I did a lot of discussion, rather than giving notes. So we used to have lots of discussions, didn't we? And
Oh, it was very lively.
Yes. And I remember one girl told me, do you know, she said, you used to have these discussions, and then you sort of led us on, and she said, and we thought they were our ideas.
Yes. Well, it's a much better method of teaching. And of course, it goes right back to Plato and Socrates.
Yes,
it's the oldest method of teaching that we know about. We were probably the ones to whom ideas mattered a great deal. Ideas were like people to us. You would fall in love with an idea. You'd be angry with an idea. You'd flirt with an idea, So we were arguing and talking and discussing things from, when we were very, very young. Nearly 50 years now when we first met.
We were just like a family, and we all knew each other. We were interested in whatever anybody else was doing, If they went into county sports or national sports, we followed them down in a coach.
Yes. Yeah, the late 50s, early to mid-60s was a very good time because our teachers had been through the war. They'd either been in the armed forces or they'd been putting up with privations and so on back at home. They were men and women of great substance, of great strength of character because of this. And they were still young and vigorous enough to deal with us. And also, this was at the high point of the post-war welfare state notion that education was important, it was a central function of what society is here for, and we should do it properly. But as far as the English lessons concerned, we had old Ronald Ridout's book. Do you remember Today?
Yes. Oh, English Today.
Yes.
Yes, you did.
Yes, there was a little extract from something, and then there were some questions about it, and then
yes.
a little point of grammar, and then you used to be able to...
Yes.
But what I remember about it was not only the grammar exercises, which I always managed to do quite well at, because for me it wasn't difficult. You know, some kids are good at maths; they see their way through an equation very quickly. I could do that with a sentence, you see. And once Enid had explained what an adjectival clause was, or an adverbial clause, or whatever it was, I could sort of see them quite clearly. And we had this thing where we had to parse the sentences.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Go through them all.
I mean, I remember you saying it helped you to build a sentence.
Well, it did. Well, that was one aspect of it. But the other thing that Enid used to do was to let us write stories. Not very often. I mean, it wasn't a sort of write a story this week.
3 weeks.
Once every 3 weeks or something like that. Because we had to write an essay or something, you know, and it would have been an essay about what I did in the holidays or about the book we were reading or something like that. But every so often we were allowed to write a story, and I loved that. And used to read out my stories sometimes to the class.
Yes, you were the best at writing in the class.
Well, you were my first publisher, you see. You
Yes.
published my stories to the class.
Yes, you certainly were the best. I can remember one, which was the view from your bedroom window, which was very, very good.
I remember that very well, because at the time we were living in Llandanog.
Yeah.
Not overlooking this part of the bay, but a little bit further south, looking south towards a place called Mochras, which is Shell Island, they call it, you know. And there's the little RAF station there where my father used to work. And from my window, I could see everything with a sort of surrealist clarity, like in the paintings of Salvador Dali, you know, every little tiny detail far off, absolute clarity. And I was becoming interested in the visual arts at this time, looking at a lot of pictures, going to galleries whenever I went to London and so on, and trying to draw myself. And I still remember sitting there writing this and enjoying describing the view and finding metaphorical ways of describing it. I remember the train used to go along the little station at Llandanog Halt, and at night it was all lit up. It looked like a great golden caterpillar or something, you know, and that sort of thing. So I do remember that one.
Yes.
It's funny you should mention
I
that.
can remember that. It was one of the best essays I'd read.
Must be.
Because I'd given that topic before, and
Yeah.
I'd had, well, dull accounts.
Yeah.
And then I remember yours came, and you had the great mark of 8 out of 10. I can remember that
know.
because I didn't give full marks. I was mean, wasn't I? I was really a mean marker.
Well, 8 out of 10 was a very good mark.
Which
so-
was the highest you could get.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
I don't know why. I must have been brought up like that in my old school. I suppose I thought it couldn't possibly be perfection.
Well, you're quite right, of course. A work of art is you know, talking about essays, school essays, works of art, but the point is it can't be perfect. You can always improve it. The only thing that can be perfect, actually, in literary terms, is a haiku.
Oh, yes.
17
haiku.
syllables.
Yes.
You can be
yes.
perfect in a haiku.
Yes.
Or a sonnet, if you're Shakespeare or Keats or
Yes.
someone, or Wordsworth. But anything much bigger than that, it's going to have flaws, and there's going to be a passage that doesn't quite work, and there's going to be a word that doesn't really, you know. So the shorter things are, the more likely you are to be able to achieve perfection, even if you never do. So I completely understand, Anita, you're not giving me
Not giving you 10.
10 out of 10.
I thought it might go to your head.
Well, yes, that was the danger of that. I was a conceited young boy. But no, I still remember that essay. It must be nearly 50 years ago when I wrote
Yes,
that.
and I can remember it too, you see,
Well,
so it
well,
must
I
have
see.
been outstanding, mustn't it? It must have been a germ there.
And now it's all lost,
Yeah.
except in our memories. Yeah.
Miss Jones was not shy about bringing her own reading interests into the classroom.
I was a great Hardy fan in my teens. I read all Hardy in the library. I
We
loved
did a Hardy novel with you, didn't we? It was Under the Greenwood Tree.
Yes, Under the Greenwood Tree.
Yes.
Yes. And we did a passage to India.
That's right.
And I remember you knew a lot more about these Eastern religions than I did, really. You had gone into it deeply.
I think we were pretending, you know. I think we were just making it all up.
So
No,
I selected...
this is the bumptiousness of youth, you know.
Yes.
You read a short book about something, you
Yes.
think you're the world's expert. I'm sure we were doing to be like that.
So I let you have your heads over that.
Well,
yes.
and we also did Conrad's Victory.
Oh, we did.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I didn't remember. we
Axel
did Victory.
Heist and
Yes.
Mr. Jones, the sinister Mr. Jones.
Yes.
And the girl he rescues, Lena, from the ladies' orchestra. Do you remember that?
I'd forgotten that.
Well, I'd never have read that if it hadn't been for being in your class.
Yeah.
And I think it's a wonderful book.
Yeah.
It's my favourite Conrad book. We did Macbeth for O-level.
Yes.
Of course, Macbeth is a wonderful play for teenagers,
Yes.
as is Romeo and Juliet, of course. But they because they get young love and they get murder. They understand them.
Yeah.
And Macbeth is so dramatic and so full of rich and
Condensed,
wonderful
isn't it?
language.
So much more condensed.
Yes, it's a short play,
Yeah.
and it's such a dramatic one.
You're listening to Philip Pullman and Miss Jones in conversation here on BBC Radio 4 with me, Terry Jones. Along with the novels, the world of poetry was to be opened by the most unlikeliest of sources.
Now, there was one afternoon in the winter of my second year, when I was about 12 or maybe 13. Anyway, the point was, in came three boys from the year above. And they came sort of shambling in, great big brutes with their knuckles dragging on the ground. And they began to say, "A cold coming we had of it, just the worst time of the year for a journey, and such a long journey. The way is deep and the weather sharp, the very dead of winter." And I thought, what on earth is this? Is this a story? Is it a poem? It doesn't rhyme. It doesn't. There's no rhythm. It doesn't sound like a story. And it went on, and all through this marvelous poem, this extraordinary thing. Late at night, we came to a village. How did it come? With a running stream and a watermill beating the darkness, and three trees in the low sky, and it intoxicated me.
Well, yes.
It captivated. And only later on did I learn that this was the poem called "The Journey of the Magi" by T.S. Eliot. So that was one of the moments when I realised that poetry was going to be very important to me, because it had a physical effect on me. My skin bristled, my heart beat faster. And when we were doing poetry later with Enid, especially those poets that I came to love so much, the metaphysicals, Donne and Marvell and so on, it had the same effect.
I added that to the syllabus because I thought you enjoyed it.
Well, we did. We loved them because they're so strange and so unlike anything else. So sexy too. You know, they're about
John
they're
Donne.
about and To His Coy Mistress, a marvellous poem.
Yes.
Let's make love now. Let's not wait. We're going to be dead soon.
Yes.
This is something that every teenage boy wants to hear. But most of all, when we got to the sixth form and did books 1 and 2 of Paradise Lost.
Yes, that affected you.
Yes.
Yes. And now I've got your book on Milton.
Yeah, well, one of the consequences of that was that a year or two ago, Oxford University Press invited me to write a foreword or an introduction to a new edition of Paradise Lost, and I was able to refer to that period of studying it with Enid in the little sixth form room.
I think I enjoyed it as much as you did.
Yes.
Yes, because
Well, what we used to do was read it around, didn't we? We
that's
read it
right.
out loud.
Yes, you read it out loud
Yeah.
straight through.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like this stopping and starting and explaining because it broke the effect.
And you don't need to, because the sound of the verse itself
Yes, carries
tells
on.
you a lot more than you think it does. Just as was happening with The Journey of the Magi, that was the sound
Yes.
of the words themselves that was intoxicating me. So to be able to study great poems, great novels, with a sympathetic teacher who you knew was enjoying it as much as you were, it was a real privilege, and I look back on it with great gratitude. I just had a feeling for the medium of language, of words. I was interested in words. I wanted to know where they came from, what their history was, why they were spelled like that. And part of this involved, I suppose, an awareness of such things as iambic rhythm and trochaic rhythm and the difference between them, and when a rhyme is a proper rhyme and when a half rhyme is necessary because you've got half rhymes all the way through, like in Louis MacNeice's Autumn Journal. So I was always fascinated by that. I actually wrote a lot of songs. I wrote a lot of poems, and I wrote songs too, and I sang them. Thank God nobody recorded them.
And you
It's very
played.
good.
You played an
Played
instrument.
the guitar. Songs like Bob Dylan's the Times They Are Changing, and When the Ship Comes In. I was with my great friend Enid Jones, and one summer day we went sort of busking in, I think it was Criccieth or Pwllheli, and it was a summer afternoon, and the cafe was full of holiday makers having a good time. And we went in there, and Melvin made a great speech about Vietnam, which made them all miserable. And then I sang a Bob Dylan song with my homemade harmonica holder made out of a wire coat hanger and a bit of string, And halfway through my passionate solo, the string came undone and the damn thing was just dangling away in front of my face. But I managed to finish the song and get it. So we didn't have a great career as political agitators or musicians, but that's what I was listening to at the time.
And do you remember you had a funny little period in the first year, sixth? I don't know if you remember it. You sort of couldn't be bothered.
I was going through some sort of teenage angst.
I think you were, yes. You just couldn't be bothered.
I did have a period, yes, I do remember that. I had a period of, I was probably just fed up. But,
yes.
I dramatised it, and it was existential despair.
I remember having a little talk with you.
Yeah. Yes, I remember that.
But, as ever, there were always new experiences on the horizon.
I'd formed this notion that I wanted to go to Oxford. For no reason. There was no family connection with Oxford or anything like that. I just liked the idea of going to Oxford. And what you did then was to take the special Oxford Scholarship exam. And I approached it as a sort of sporting contest, really. It was another exam. I was quite good at doing exams. I liked writing about the things that interested me. So I sat this exam. They did it at school. I had a little room to myself and did it. And then off it went, and shortly after I got invited to go to Oxford for an interview. And I hadn't been to Oxford before that, but it was a wonderful day. The sun was shining on these beautiful old stone buildings, and I stayed the night in the college, and it was fabulous, wonderful. And I had the interview, and then just before Christmas heard that I'd been offered a scholarship. So I was sort of floating through the rest of that year, full of conceit, because I knew I only had to get 2 E's at A-level in order to get the place. But fortunately, I did a bit better than that.
A little bit better than that, Philip. Yes, a good bit better than that. One of our pupils had a scholarship to Oxford.
Didn't often happen, did it?
It didn't often happen. From this little scholar Didw in the heart of Merry Yarmouth, as it was then.
Yeah.
Should have had quite inflated.
Armed with his schooling in Wales and with his experiences of Oxford and beyond, Philip kept in touch with Miss Jones via picture postcards, letters and seasonal messages. In this instance, through notes at the bottom of a Christmas card, Enid learns of a new development in her former pupil's life.
I have taken a great step. I have become a teacher, to my own amazement. I did a postgraduate course and now work in a middle school in Oxford. At college, they taught us to be child-centred, a precept I instantly discarded. I have become a savage devotee of clause analysis. I used to teach him that. But then, when was I not? And I serve the muses as ever. Happy New Year. And you were in the age of clause analysis.
Clause analysis, yes. I mean, there are various ways of dominating a class. You can frighten them, or you can interest them, or you can entertain them. But you've got to do it somehow. You've got to control the class. You can't let them control you.
No.
So you have to choose one of those ways, or find whichever way suits your personality best. Some teachers are naturally full of authority and slightly terrifying people, and they don't have any trouble at all. Kids are quiet, and even if they know they're not going to get hit, as they do these days, some people have that sort of charisma or whatever it is. But if you haven't got that, you've got to find some other way of doing it. And my way of keeping a class quiet was to tell them stories. I told countless stories, but mostly from the great corpus of myths, Greek myths.
Oh yeah, I did that in one class too. I don't know. I had to take this class, I think part-time or something. So I decided to do the myths and legends of them. And they quite liked it.
Well, they're wonderful stories.
They were stories, you see, weren't they? Yes.
They're wonderful stories. They're stories that have lasted 3,000 years. They must be good. And it's a privilege to tell them, really. But I used to tell the Greek myths, the Iliad and the Odyssey, over and over again to the classes I taught, which was wonderful for me because it was a wonderful sort of apprenticeship in storytelling.
Yes.
A lot of teaching dogma now runs a different sort of way. When you gave us a story to write, I would just sit down and write and just start at the beginning and work all the way through to the end without thinking about a plan or anything else of that sort. And it came out all right. But teachers now have to teach according to this particular rigmarole, where first of all you make your plan, and then you have a beginning, a middle and an end, and then you write a draft, and then you go through it and cross out bits and put other bits in, and then you write a final version, and that's how you write. Well, you know, it isn't how you write. I've never written like that.
No, I quite agree.
To tell children this is the way to write is going to turn a lot of them off. You see, if we'd had to do that now, in the fourth year or the fifth year or something, I don't suppose I'd ever have finished that piece about the view from my window. There'd just been notes and a bit of perfunctory writing, and I would have got 2 out of 10 instead of 8 out of 10.
I thought, you see, well, I better do this because this seems the right thing to do. Write down what's your introduction, etc., etc. And then I found it myself so restrictive. If ever I wanted to write something, I could never do it in that way.
No, you've got to do, writing is a process of discovery.
Yes.
It's not just knowing things and putting them down. It's discovering them as you write. And if you know in advance what you're going to write, you're not going to discover anything. So the way I wrote when I was in Enid's class is exactly the way I write now. I like to write almost into the darkness, not knowing what's going to happen next.
After several years of teaching, Pullman finally fulfilled his ambition to become a published storyteller. And on publication of his first book, he made sure that his former teacher was one of the first to receive a copy.
And I thought, well, I'd like to send a copy to Enid. So I sent her a copy of this book, and I wrote and told her what I was doing. And I've sent her a copy of every one of my books since then.
Dear Miss Jones, I was here now. How are you keeping? I keep saying to myself that I must go back and visit everyone I knew and the places I remember, but I never seem to find time. I think that when I last wrote to you, I had just begun to write this novel. Well, here it is, finished and produced. And I hope you enjoy it. Your quondam pupil, Philip Pullman.
You're listening to Philip Pullman and Miss Jones in conversation here on BBC Radio 4 with me, Terry Jones. Philip didn't find everything about being a published author quite met up with his expectations, and in this letter he shares his frustrations with his former secondary school teacher.
And it just says, never judge a book by its cover. But of course we always do, and rightly so. And that's why publishers retain expensive design departments. But they can make mistakes underlined. I should cover it with brown paper if I were you, as we used to do with school textbooks. The words are all right. My warmest regards as ever, Philip.
It's always a pleasure to know that she's got my latest book or whatever it is, and I hear news of the cats, and yeah, it's a regret to me that I don't live more closer than I do, because we're looking out across from the rock just beside Harlech Castle, which is built high above. Well, the sea, when it was built, the sea apparently came right up to the foot of the castle rock.
That's what they say, yes.
Yes, but now it's an area of flat land with sand dunes, big sand dunes, and then beyond it the sea and the clean peninsula in the background. And on this flat land there is there's the school I went to, the school we've been talking about all this time, as you look up towards Snowdonia and that way. For me, the magic of this scene is the Morva, the flat land, with the dunes and the beach and the marram grass and the wind. It's this liminal place, the place between neither sea nor shore, neither mountains nor fully flat land. I just love it. And Harlech Beach and those sand dunes from here turn up in my dreams still.
And they call that view, what you were talking about, a Good God Corner, don't they?
Good God Corner, yes, that's right.
Because everybody says, good God, as they come there.
It's a wonderful spot to take photographs from, especially on a sunny day, because the stupendous curve of this beautiful white beach.
The dreamlike landscape is there in the books, and so too is his debt to his old teacher.
I defined what Enid did for me in the acknowledgements at the end of the amber spyglass, when I talked about education being the marriage of delight and responsibility.
Ah, yes, it was nice.
Because it began in delight, the sheer pleasure, the sheer fun and exhilaration of reading something you loved and talking about it. And it moved on to responsibility. The responsibility that arises out of the need to say clearly what you've felt, to explain what it is that's particularly moving or complex or interesting about this thing. And so responsibility arising naturally out of delight. That's what I learned from this lady all those years ago, because she led us through both things.
That's very nice. I'm a bit overwhelmed sometimes.
In his Dark Materials trilogy, Philip Pullman has created a universe so atmospheric and tangible that it's almost impossible to believe that it doesn't exist somewhere. The books set out on a soaring arc of imagination that sustains and pays off in a most wonderful way. And yet, all the way through, the books touch on human truths and real philosophical insights, which I suppose is why they have achieved such worldwide acclaim. But he and his former teacher still find time to correspond.
Enid is the only person now who's known me since I was that young, apart from the members of my family. My mother and father are both dead. And I regard Enid as a sort of surrogate mother-in-law. I hope you don't mind I hope you don't mind my saying this.
I said I've adopted you now.
Well, there we are, you see. So Enid is my connection with the boy that I used to be, and there's no one else who has that place in my life. When a book of mine comes out, the first thing I do is send a copy to her.
Yes, it's lovely to have it.
The publication process for me isn't complete until
I'm
Miss
delighted
Jones's
I'm delighted when it comes.
And it all started here, in this dramatic stretch of Welsh coast, with a pupil-teacher relationship that ripened into a friendship that has now endured for nearly half a century. For me, Terry Jones, it's been a pleasure to have had this chance to pay tribute to the genius of Philip Pullman and Miss Jones. But how does Miss Jones rate her former pupils' literary efforts?
I still get 8 out of 10 for them.
Oh, I give you 10.
Oh, bless you.
Philip Pullman and Miss Jones was presented by Terry Jones and produced by Gareth Nelson Davies.